clear colors. There are still traces of the stucco, ground marble dust, which was applied over the surface. Like Selinus, her neighbor city, Akragas aimed at the grandiose and gigantic, eventually outdoing her. The Temple of Zeus at Akragas surpassed Temple G of Selinus in all dimensions. Scattered amongst its ruins were found fragments of Atlantes, that is, naked males who support the structure with bent arms, just as Atlas carried the heavens on his shoulders. 38 Atlantes, each 27 feet tall, stood in the recesses between the columns. It is believed that many thousands of Carthaginian prisoners taken in 480 BC at the Battle of Himera were forced to work on this temple, and that the Atlas figures symbolize them. This temple was a victory monument. It was still unfinished when 75 years later, the Carthaginians took Akragas and destroyed it. Earthquakes completed the ruin. Capitals found amongst the ruins of the temple show that the columns were really half columns, though of enormous size, abutting against a solid wall. Here's one of the capitals. At the bottom of the column, a man could have stood comfortably within the concave recess of one flute. The building must have looked something like this. However, since the height and other details are unknown, reconstruction must remain largely hypothetical. The form of the temple is Doric, yet many of its characteristics are the very opposite in nature. The Parthenon. The temple of Athena Parthenos on the Acropolis of Athens. It had remained virtually unharmed for 2,000 years. It served as a church in early Christian times, and then as a mosque under the Turks. During the siege by the Venetians under Morosini, the greatest disaster occurred. On the 26th of September in 1687, the temple, which was being used by the Turks as a powder magazine, was hit by the cannon shot of a German master gunner from Lüneburg. Fortunately, just before this catastrophe, Jacques Carré, a painter traveling in the suite of a French diplomat, had the opportunity to see the pedimental figures and to draw them. In the west pediment, he records that he saw 20 figures in addition to the horses. Of these, only fragments remain. The only originals left on the temple itself are a male and a female torso. They are Cecrops, the legendary first king of Athens, and his daughter Pandrosos. They cling to each other as though for shelter against the storms of 2.5 millennia. The figures now on the east pediment are modern casts in concrete from the originals in London, where they were taken by Lord Elgin in 1600. In the left corner of the pediment, the 4-horse chariot of Helios, the sun god, rises from the horizon. What imaginative audacity to burst through those triangular fetters. A reclining male figure turns toward the rising sun. Some say it is Hercules, others Dionysus. The group of 3 goddesses turns toward the center of the pediment, where was shown, according to Pausanias, the birth of Athena. At the opposite end of the pediment, the moon goddess in her chariot is disappearing into the ocean. Night gives way to dawn at Athena's miraculous birth. The pediments here are reserved for the gods. The 92 metopes which proceed along the entablature right around the temple are a picture book of the great mythical battles. The splendor of the Pentelic marble should not make us forget that both entablature and pediments were once picked out in color. Nor need we assume that this modern representation is too fanciful. Here, Lapiths fight centaurs. We met the theme already on the west pediment of the Temple of Zeus at Olympia. The fight is divided into separate incidents. Men matched against horsemen in ever-varying studies of combat. High up on the wall of the cella Taking in the porch in front as well as the chamber in the rear, ran a continuous ionic frieze. It was some 175 yards long and a little more than 1 yard high. No direct sunlight ever shone on it, for it was placed immediately below the paneled ceiling of the colonnaded aisle. Now with the ceiling gone, it is exposed to bright sunlight. But originally, it must have been visible only in dim shadow. The festival of the Panathenaea was celebrated every 4 years. The Olympians, the blessed ones who enjoy watching the struggles of mortals, are shown here relaxed in their chairs. Ares, the god of war, a little bored, clasps his knees. Hera lifts her veil to Zeus. Maidens bring up chairs, a symbolic invitation to the gods, who in fact are already seated and attending unseen by mortal eyes. The peplos, the robe for the statue of Athena, is being unfolded. Athena, in whose honor the festival is celebrated, is seated next to Hephaestus, the lame god of the forge. The Athenians love to join them in a certain intimacy. Apollo engages in conversation with the young Poseidon of the dark locks. Apollo's sister Artemis, the unapproachable huntress, is here relaxed and gentle. Human beings, headed by sacrificial animals and offerings to the gods, proceed along both sides of the cella. If it is true that here art sees man on an idealized, abstract level of existence, then it's true also of animals. The 4-horse teams here on parade take part in special races. 400 men and 200 animals fill this frieze. And now the cavalcade of horsemen. No saddles for them, no spurs nor stirrups, only reins. Perfection of horsemanship, and perhaps symbolic of a growth in this culture's consciousness. The procession, which started at dawn, is already well advanced, but at the starting point, some stragglers are still busy with the last-minute preparations. A cloak is girded, the waiting horses scratch the ground impatiently and rear up. The surrounding frieze has been taken from the Ionic temple. The broadening of the cella to a central space is also Ionic influence. The center aisle, 36 feet wide, could span nothing heavier than a wooden ceiling. The 2-storied interior colonnade runs on 3 sides round the statue of the goddess. This is the Athena Parthenos by Phidias, 40 feet high, of gold and ivory on a wooden frame. A small-scale marble copy of the Roman period supplements the descriptions of ancient writers. The color and light effects in that room cannot be told, only implied, only imagined. In buildings on the Acropolis, the Propylaea, the Nike Temple, the Erechtheion, we can see the synthesis of the Ionic and Doric spirits in the age of Pericles, where the two great architectural forms stand side by side. It's not the gigantic measurement, but the elegance of the Ionic style, the slim, high-reaching, decorative game matched to Doric sternness.